just noting this.
Thank you very much. I'm not going to turn on my camera as the lights have now gone out, and I'm going to try and keep the connection as stable as possible. A very warm welcome to you all to this Parliamentary Oversight Committee. It is Thursday, the 18th of March 2021. I'd like to welcome all the members and parliamentary officials that are in attendance. I'm going to first table apologies. I have received none. Has anybody else received apologies or would like to table apologies at the stage?
Nothing from my side, Chair.
Okay, if there are no apologies, we will then move on. I'm just going to start with the rules of engagement for virtual meetings. All members are muted at the beginning of the meeting to avoid background noises. Please, could you flag any points of order in the chat function? All video and audio should please be switched off to improve the quality of the call. Please turn off your mics and videos once you've concluded your inputs. And the maintenance of order for today's meeting comes from the directives for sittings of the House and meetings of committees by electronic means, which were ATC'd on Friday, the 17th of April, 2020. So in today's meeting, we're going to be considering vote 2, the Western Cape Provincial Parliament in the schedule to the Western Cape Appropriation Bill 2021 B4 of 2021. And I'd very much like to welcome the officials as well as the members present today. Good afternoon to you, Mr. Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, and Mr. Secretary. I'm not sure if you'd like to make some introductory remarks at this stage.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson, Honourable Members, Honourable Deputy Speaker, the Secretary and the SMT, and of course to all the members of staff of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. If I may, Chairperson, right from the outset, perhaps request that the Secretary introduces the team, then I can come with my introductory remarks. Do you mind if I do it that way?
Not at all.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chairperson. Secretary, will you please introduce the team?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good afternoon, Chairperson. Good afternoon, Speaker, Deputy Speaker, and colleagues. Chairperson, accompanying the political principals today here at this POC engagement is myself, Romeo Adams, as the Secretary of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. We have Ms. Chanel Fouchier. She is the Director PEO. We have Mr. Vernon Titus, the Director Institutional Enablement. We have Ms. Nicole Peterson. She is the Chief Financial Officer. We have Ms. Genevieve Ackham, who's the Manager in the Office of the Secretary and also the Caretaker Manager for the Portfolio of Strategy and Institutional Oversight. We then also have various managers from each of the directorates here present in the meeting. Would you want me to go through each of them, Chairperson, or is it in order when they do speak, they could just give us their names and their portfolio that they participate in? Alternatively, I can go through each of the names, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I think if they just introduce themselves when they make an input, and we will, however, note them for the purposes of the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Honourable Chairperson, the Western Cape Provincial Parliament's budget has increased by 10.180 million rands, and that is from 203 million rands, 676,000 rands, which includes a direct charge, which then led us to a budget of 213 million rands, 856,000. It must also be noted, Chair, that in 2021-22 financial year, there was a baseline reduction of 14.672 million rands, forthcoming from vote savings identified. We have also highlighted this in our POC meeting, the previous one. This is as part of a provincial response to the fiscal constraints which were placed on the country by COVID-19 pandemic. And as a result, we had to respond in a way that shows that this Western Cape Provincial Parliament is not in any way immune on tightening the belt, but also in terms of responding to the current fiscal conditions. This was surrendered, Honorable Chairperson, to perform their constitutional obligations. We are mindful, Honorable Chairperson, of the new law which has come into force effective on the 1st of April. This provincial parliament is ready, and we are also in a position where, as you know, Honorable Chairperson, the Speaker's Consultative Political Party Forum has had engagements, workshops with the Electoral Commission, just to ensure that we are all empowered, we're on the same page in terms of accountability, but also in terms of implementing the Political Party Funding Act. Honorable Chairperson, this will be continually reviewed and assessed on the annual basis, because we understand that some dynamics change, and on a time where it changes, we need to be able to function and operate within that environment, given the lay of the land. Other focus areas which will be driven from a strategic level include, but not limited to, institutional governance, inter alia, with the issues of inter and intra-parliamentary relations, capacity building of members and staff, innovation and modernization, and the use of technology, which we have seen during this COVID-19 as a case in point, including this meeting now. It's because we have a very capable team of our IT, ICT unit, and of course, the infrastructure that we've been able to employ during this period. There are 116 funded positions, Chairperson, in this parliament for 2021-22 financial year. Of the 116 positions, we have 14 vacancies, which we anticipate to fill all of those 14 in the following way. In the first quarter, we'll fill up the 8 positions. In the second quarter, we'll fill up the 3. And in the third quarter, we'll then complete the quantum of available vacant positions, and that will be the last 3. And then it will leave us with a complete 116 as envisaged in terms of the staff establishment at this point in time. Honorable Chairperson, that's it for me for now, and I welcome your scrutiny over the affairs of this institution and how we spend, how we perform in the non-financials, and of course, generally, Honorable Chairperson, as we do here in the POC, we are here as an important partner. We view you as a very strategic partner in ensuring that our work that we do remains above everything else. The work that is in line with the statutes that guide us, and that is what we're trying to ensure that we stick to all the time, and we'll make sure that we're able to answer all questions as best as possible with this capable team that is accompanying myself and the Deputy Speaker. Thank you very much, Chairperson, and the honorable members.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you very much for tabling your budget here with the Parliamentary Oversight Committee. We're now going to go to a page-by-page review of the budget. In some sections, I will put a few pages together. So let's get straight into it. Members, in the Blue Book, we're starting on page 55, Vote 2 Provincial Parliament. I'm going to table the overview, which is from page 55 to page 57. Are there any questions on page 55 to 57? If you could just raise your hands, please. I don't see any hands there. I have one question, if I may.
Chair.
And that is...
My hand is up. My
okay.
apologies for the delay.
All right. Okay, I'll just read my question then, and then I'll recognize you, Honourable Lecker. Thank you. So on page 57, the first sentence, the continuous implementation of the Financial Management of Parliament and Provincial Legislatures Act and the Enterprise Resource Planning System, enhancing controls relating to the system. Could I just understand what this means, the enhancing controls relating to the ERP system? What does this mean as a budget decision, and what resources are dedicated to this? And then on page, no, that's it, it's the page after. Then I recognize you, Honourable Lecker.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good afternoon, everybody. Chair, let me just say part of my opening remarks is around the release of the APPs. From my side, it was quite concerning that we received the APPs very late. It pushes one into a little tight corner, and hence I think I've sent an email to both the Secretary as well as Mr. Speaker in relation to that. But let me come to page 56, Chair. There has been a number of instances where I feel that as Parliament, we've dropped our standards of oversight, including examples such as not taking actions against MECs that failed to declare benefits like the lavish life of birthday parties. And yet, in many instances, if you're looking at the Education Committee, where I feel that the Democratic Alliance is using its majority to block oversight over education. And I think, therefore, I really need to understand if through this budget, there are provisions to assist to improve our oversight and accountability capacity. Secondly, Chair, I would like to check if it would be possible to ask the registrar to visit some cases from previous terms that were not properly investigated and closed. And maybe I may expand to this if I get a response to my second question. And then coming to page 57, Chair, under the budget decisions, you would note that the stabilization of the functional enhancement project are a focus area for the 2021-2022 financial year. And therefore, Chair, I think it's important for me to ask as to how far are we with the implementation of the functional assets enhancement, and as well as it is meant by its stabilization. But also on that, do we have any vacancies, especially for critical posts around the issue of the financial implementation of the functional enhancement? Then again, Chair, if you're looking at the budget decision, that COVID-19 as a pandemic has placed a significant financial constraint on the budget itself, and stabilization of internal functions and business continuity. And therefore, I want to ask how much is budgeted for COVID-19 related expenditures like PPEs, and whether the legislature has measures in place to ensure that the BBEE compliance in all its procurement is in place, because it's for utmost importance, especially for this time in crisis. Yeah, it's up to page 57, Chair, or can I go to 58?
Up to 57, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Honourable Mackenzie.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, just on the first point that the Speaker made with regards to the 14 vacancies, I just want trying to get an understanding what was the reasons that those vacancies were not filled. And on page 57, one of the missions of Parliament is to empowering our members and staff to function optimally. And I want to link that to page 57, sorry, that was page 55. On page 57, the provincial enabling facilities for members and financial support to political parties, to ensuring that members have the appropriate resources to perform their constitutional obligation. How does that vision and mission transfer into practicalities to ensure members perform their obligations optimally? It's got a sense there's a bit of a mismatch at times with regards to that. And with regards to promoting public participation, for example, the standing committee is going out in 3 weeks' time. Has that vision of this Parliament, and it's a great vision to have, again, how does it, in practical terms, go down when the committee goes in oversight in 3-4 weeks, that the unit go out in advance or advertise on able community centers with appropriate technology so that it could be either hybrid or otherwise? It's great vision, but how does it transfer practically so this vision can be implemented successfully? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Honourable Allen.
Thank you, Chairperson. I would want to welcome the speaker's introductory remarks as well, and also feel it's incumbent on me as a member of the Education Committee. Being a priority A committee, we are one of the most visible and busy committees in terms of our oversight over the WCED, and I wanted to place that on the record. But I also wanted to double check regarding, am I able to ask a question regarding the introductory remarks made by the speaker?
Yes, you're most welcome.
No, thank you so much, Speaker. Through you, Chairperson, to the Speaker, thank you so much for your introductory comments. I wanted to double check, and I'm not sure if I'm going to jump the gun, but in terms of monies that were surrendered to the Provincial Revenue Fund, do we have a percentage of what is coming back? Is X amount totally forfeited and X amount will come back? Just to get an understanding of that, it will be highly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Any final questions in this round?
Yes, Chairperson, I have one more question.
Thank you. Honourable Mackenzie, please proceed.
Thank you. Again, on the vision, and if now curious, just wanted to find out, have we considered, as this Parliament, apologies for that, to do baseline studies with our other 8 provincial counterparts in the country to see where we are, whether we're doing much better or where there's elements for improvement, was providing support for our members and our staff to see whether we perform optimally or where there's room for improvement, just to ensure that we're at least on par with our colleagues in other provinces. Has that been done, or is there any consideration going forward to see if that can be done? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll then hand over to the administration.
Chief Whip, Honourable Chairperson, what I will do, firstly, your question that you asked, the CFO is going to respond to the first one, very first one, and then the question on that, Honourable Leke, I'm going to respond to that partly, and the rest will be responded to by the administration, but I'm going to respond and see how far we get to that. Honourable Mackenzie, yeah, the administration will respond, but I'm going to touch on some of the areas. And then Honourable Allen, the CFO is going to respond to you. The first one, Honourable Chairperson, I think, let me just dismiss my own area that I need to deal with. Honourable Leke has asked a question about whether certain areas of the work that was done by the Conduct Committee in the previous term should be revisited. I think the question by Honourable Leke, Honourable Chair, is a question that should be directed to the Conduct Committee, which is empowered to deal with such matters as the matters relate to the conduct those members, as she may have referred to. And I think the honourable member also in question must, I must say, Chair, that as the appeal authority, being the Speaker of Parliament, I will not at this stage, suggest that we deal with these matters at the POC session, because the nature of the POC is to monitor how we perform in terms of FAMPLA, and of course to ensure that we do quality oversight over the affairs of this Parliament, led by the Executive Authority. I hope I've responded to Honourable Leke. It's really a matter that she can take up with the Conduct Committee. And then the second matter, Honourable Chairperson, is the matter raised by Honourable Mackenzie on the work of the PO, which is the Public Education and Outreach Unit. I fully support what the Honourable Mackenzie says, and I think that is why the work of the committee, of the unit, has begun to change in terms of the focus areas and how it seeks to maximize on the current workload, on the current work structure, and that is to be able to be seen in communities, in really promoting the work of this Parliament, but of course ensuring that the support is given to other areas, other components of Parliament. What is beautiful about this is that Ms. Fouché, who's the director, is currently been the acting director in the area of parliamentary services. So she knows exactly what is happening in that area. So it is important that we give these views as we do, but they must be taken into account, which I think this is what we're going to be doing, so that you can go into a committee, into an area as the standing committee, and you find the people who attend the standing committee session of public hearing, not to be confused whether it is human settlements or health, but we've got these kind of units like the PO that can support us in that work. And I think that is something that we need to really maximize on in order to support committee work. The baseline studies, the Deputy Speaker will help us in dealing with that question, because currently the administration, I'm sure they will have to provide some input insofar as the work that has already been done, but the Deputy Speaker will deal with that question. Honourable Allen, the last question that your question specifically, all I can say is that we surrendered 12% of our budget, not in any way other than to support the cause of fighting COVID-19 and the global savings of the national fiscus of South Africa. So we were asked to contribute towards that, and we had to really comply with the request, but we tried to limit to what extent we can release the funds, so that we don't have a situation where we are overburdened given the limitations. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Speaker. Should I hand over to the CFO next?
Chair, if I may.
Mr. Jawudeen, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my name is Jawudeen, Manager Finance, the review Chair, to introduce myself. Just with regards to, I think there's two questions I just want to touch on, and the first one is in line with one of your questions, Chair, and that's with regards to the ERP and the provision specifically budget-wise and the resources with regards to that regarding the implementation of the ERP enterprise resource planning. I might just refer to Mr. Taita to speak further on regarding the further implementation and the progress with regards to that, but just with regards to the budget amount budgeted for, in total for the new financial year, we have budgeted an amount of a rounded up amount of about 1.8 million, but that 1.8 million is split up along the different elements of the ERP. So that would be ERP additions, business BI implementation, ERP support, fixed assets, the different softwares like IDU and DocuVision. But in total, there's around about 1.8 million provision in the budget for ERP. That's specifically regarding the ERP implementation. And just to add, if I may add on to what the speaker has mentioned, to touch on a question by Member Allen, Yes, we have surrendered an amount of a percentage of about 12% during the adjustments estimate to the provincial treasury. Unfortunately, we're not receiving any of that funds back as asked by member Ellen. However, there was a third, which normally we have one adjustment estimate process. In this current financial year, we had 3 adjustment estimates process as managed by a provincial treasury. In the third adjustments estimate, the department were once again asked about whether they're going to be surrendering any funds with regards to savings throughout the financial year. WCPP has then made a decision that we will not be surrendering any additional funds, and any savings or rollovers will then be transferred into the outer years as well as the MTF, because of the fact that our budget has reduced in the outer years, and the fiscal constraint on that budget we'll have to supplement with the rollovers we have in this current financial year. Thank you, Chair. I think that's the two specifically with regards to that relates to the budget. I think with regards to the ERP implementation and the function enhancement, if I may ask Mr. Titus if he could provide some further feedback on that particularly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I see the Secretary, Mr. Adams.
Chairperson, thank you, Chairperson. Before I respond to some of the questions, Chairperson, I thought I heard the speakers say that the Deputy might want to make an input on one of the questions that was posed. If it is possible, Chairperson, if we could allow the Deputy first to make such an input before the administration responds. Please, Chairperson.
Yes, of course. Thank you. Honourable Deputy Speaker, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. And just to say that I've had an unscheduled power outage, so everything is flashing on my screen here. I'm not sure if I'm going to have full control over the whole of the PSC. So my apologies if I have not heard, and I actually have not heard all the intermittent questions, if that was in regards to training. If I could just get an idea of what that is. My apologies.
Sorry, Deputy Speaker, your line is very bad. We're struggling to hear you.
Hello?
We did hear that you have a power outage.
Oh.
Perhaps, Deputy Speaker, with your permission, if you can hear me.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. I have a power outage and I can see everything's flashing on the screen. I can hardly hear.
I think then what we might do is leave the questions to the Deputy Speaker for later on in the meeting, and hopefully your power situation will improve by then. Would that be in order?
All in order, Chairperson. The Secretary will take over for now.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, maybe just a few introductory responses to the comments. The first one is with regards to the COVID-19 expenditure. Our understanding of our role in terms of COVID-19 expenditure is to ensure a health and safety environment for both members and for staff. We therefore don't have a specific budget for COVID-19 or for PPE specifically, because that function has been incorporated under our occupational health and safety responsibilities. Because if we peruse the regulations, there's been a gradual transition to incorporating the COVID-19 response to the pandemic in terms of the occupational health and safety. In terms of the purchasing of PPE, we have, let's call it, 2 sets of PPE. We have the PPE for the OHS, the occupational health and safety, that would be issued periodically to both staff and to members. And then we have the PPE that is also now part of our promotional items when members do visit their constituencies as part of the normal promotional items processes. The CFO will respond further to the BBBEE compliance, but we do follow the normal procurement processes that is allowed for in the supply chain management policies and processes in order to also procure PPE. when we look at the issue, I think there was a question that was asked by Honourable Mackenzie related to baseline studies with other provincial legislatures. We are having regular engagements with the other legislatures and national parliament, with the sharing of ideas of what they are doing, not just in the area of member support, but also other operational matters. Chairperson, what we ever have to understand is we can only cut our garment based on the cloth that we have, the cloth being the budgets. And as I shared with the POC previously, our staffing levels and our budget is probably one of the lowest, if not the lowest, if we look at the sector as a whole specifically. So where other legislatures might have the budgets, might have the funding for them to have additional measures in place. In our case, that funding would not exist and would not be available. Chairperson, just in conclusion, the CFO will deal with the issue on the budget decisions. The CFO will also, if she wants to augment with regards to the BBBEE compliance. Mr. Titus will deal with a question related to the implementation of the functional enhancement, the vacancies, the reasons why there are vacancies, and Ms. Fushia, Chairperson, will deal with the issue of public participation, just to augment the Speaker's response in terms of that. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. Are there any further inputs to the questions?
Chairperson, if I may.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Please proceed, Ms. Peterson.
Thank you. Just in terms of the budget decision, the elaboration on that specifically in regards to ERP and functional enhancement, Mr. Titus will speak to, but in relation to the BBBEE compliance, we subscribe to the Western Cape supplier database and we use the integrated procurement system of the provincial government, which all have controls integrated into that, ensuring that suppliers who are listed on there meet the documentation requirements. So where they have BEE certificates and that is all loaded on the systems. All our PPE, we try to procure through that system, and then those requirements will be addressed by us utilizing that system. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll then hand over to Mr. Titus.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, let me start with the question around the ERP controls. Chair, just to mention the background against which this is happening. I think members would remember that, especially in the payroll side of the ERP, we have had challenges in the past, specifically pertaining to salaries. There was one occasion or two where we have had challenges with that. And one of the reasons why we have had challenges is because the way that X3 is configured in the people management side of it requires significant configuration and dependency on consultants. We have looked at the current payroll system and the functionality thereof. We've had several conversations with SAGE, the mother body, with regard to the functionality and to what extent we can have a functional system that can out of box provide us with not only the systems and the reports, but is able to provide the functionality that is required within the HR space and in the members affairs space. Over and above that, Chair, we have come to a decision that we will be looking at another plug-in, which is still in the SAGE stable. SAGE 300 is a decision that has been made. Already all of the reports and all of the oversight parts, that some of which the AG has also mentioned in tightening the controls, are all prevalent within the system. The system will roll out within the near future. I think one of the other aspects that I'd have to mention, Chair, is that the current we are not leaving or abandoning X3 in totality. All of the other parts of X3 will be functioning. We are only looking at a different plug-in for payroll. We still require maintenance and ongoing maintenance for X3 as well as all of the other systems within the organization. So that is partly where we are going with my response to where we are going with regard to the ERP controls. Chair, allow me to speak about the function enhancement project. As you know, we have been implementing the recruitment facet of the functional enhancement project. One part of it is to find suitable candidates that we can appoint within positions. The speaker had indicated how those positions will be filled. The process has been taking much longer than we had anticipated. We are able to, at this stage, indicate to the members and to the House that we have been successful in securing a senior manager in the role of Parliamentary Support Services. Mr. Stemele will start on the 1st of April, so we are very happy that process has been concluded. There are 4 or 5 different posts already that have where we've had interviews already, Chair. I've just received feedback today that one of the nominated candidates have declined, and we're going to have to redo the process for the knowledge management senior officer. So it is a bit of a roving target. It's taking much longer than we had anticipated, and I don't think that we can move any faster than what we have indicated, Chair. I also want to indicate that we are also busy in terms of the functional enhancement. We have had the functional enhancement implemented, the actual structure implemented from the 1st of April 2019. We are looking at functional coherence within the structure, and we are looking at functional refinement within the structure. So this is an ongoing process. We have started conversations within the line already, and it is certainly something that we will be speaking to organized labor too. I'm sorry, Chair. I think that answers the function enhancement and the ERP control questions. There was a question from Honourable Mackenzie around this vision of the WCPP to provide staff and members with the kind of support that is required and that will make the work of members and Parliament far more effective. It is an area that we are committed to. The Honourable Mackenzie asked in practical terms, we must speak about how this could possibly happen and whether this vision that we have, and I think that is where the baseline parts had come, and perhaps there is a need for us to engage a little bit more. All that I can say to the Honourable Mackenzie is that the WCPP is indeed committed to providing the kind of resources and support, whether that is through training, whether that is through enablement, or whether that is through other kinds of technical resources. In the last POC meeting, the Honourable Mackenzie had indicated about earphones, for instance. This is something that we are really taking up and that we are in the process of looking at. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Titus. Are there any further questions? I believe that covers the members' questions.
Chairperson, Ms. Fushia on the public participation.
Yes.
Please, Chairperson.
Thank you. Ms. Fushia, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, it was obviously with COVID-19, it's challenging for public engagement. Anything that has to do with engaging with people during this time was challenging, but I was very impressed with the way in which we could, like we've said so many times, pivot in a COVID-19 universe. And we tried to use a lot of the partners and the stakeholders that we have connected with in previous times. We were able to do a virtual youth dialogue using municipal venues throughout the province, and we had participants from every single district, which was great. We were disappointed because we couldn't do the district youth parliaments like we had envisaged, but it is one of those things that we had to deal with. But we were able to work with our partners to make some things happen. Similarly, with public education and outreach workshops, we had workshops using remote locations. where we were not physically there, and we were able to connect, like I said, with partners to use venues where we could guarantee social distancing from the participants. Transport, a tricky issue in this situation. So we definitely didn't reach as many people as what we had wanted to, because we don't want to bring people to a venue. And we do not have obviously the resources to duplicate a PEO workshop in every single town in the Western Cape. But what we could do, I'm truly very impressed with. I think the focus is, for the period under review, or the last financial year, was very much on what we could get done on the admin or planning side of our business. One of the things that we finalized and we managed to do during that process is the WCPP board game. That will form part of our educational material. We will use that in workshops. It's really, really cool. We're very sad that we couldn't launch it. We wanted to have members playing against one another, but we will send the members through a little taster of what it looks like. That was finalized and delivered. We can't wait to have physical workshops again so that we can use it. We did all the planning for our Tetanati project that is starting in the beginning of the financial year. That was quite a big load. And we also managed to finalize the procurement of the WCPP's electronic stakeholder database, as well as all the specifications and the procurement through LSS funding for the digital online platform that we are hoping to launch soon in the new financial year, as well as digital public education workshops, where we can send people a link, or we can send them a flash drive, and it will be an interactive workshop that we just do on a digital platform. So we're very happy about that. In terms of stakeholder management and communication, massive amount of work that was done. Lots of support in terms of internal communication, as well as to the ad hoc committee on COVID-19. Lots and lots of work that went in there, even with training for people gradually returning to work as the risk-adjusted levels eased a bit. And then culminating, I think, in the SOPA that we had in Genadendal. So yeah, I think that very good work was done during the past financial year, albeit not necessarily in the way that we used to. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Honourable Lekker, is that one of your questions that remains unanswered, or are you covered now?
Thank you, Chair. It's actually a question, or rather a follow-up question in relation to the public participation as a process in itself. Now, Chair,
I'll allow then follow-up questions, and then also questions on page 58 and 59. Thank you. Okay. Please proceed.
Thank you so much, Chair. Chair, if you look on the YouTube channel that we have as Parliament, one would have noted that in respect to the budget itself, we had 538 people who viewed that channel. But also on the SOPA, there was something like 719 views in reply to the SOPA, and only 58 times. Now, I am really concerned and wanting to understand what tangible things are being done to promote public participation in a parliamentary process, especially now during COVID-19, but also in the light of all 4 programs for the public engagement, program 3, that it is only the programs whose budget will be cut. So I just want to know that the cut will be specifically come again to the stakeholder management and communication services, or what exactly is going to be happening there. Thank you. Then if I go over to page 58, 58, in respect to reprioritization, paragraph 1 states that it is seen to be crucial in the Sixth Parliament to establish strategic partnerships to achieve the goal of meaningful engagement with the public of the Western Cape. But yet, if you're looking at that, the 4 programs that we had, the only ones whose budget is cut is public engagement. Isn't this maybe a contradiction, or what exactly is happening there? That's my one question on page 58. I'll only have a question on page 64, but also maybe follow-ups depending on the responses. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Honourable Mackenzie, you're up next.
Thank you, Chairperson. First, if I can just make a comment, I want to say thank you for the Genadendal State of the Province address. I must say there's somebody I haven't seen in 20 years who made a comment on my Facebook page which say, "Hy's bly ons was op die plaas." So thank you for that. You certainly reached people that I definitely haven't seen in many years. One of the responses from Mr. Titus with regards to the vacancy, and I just made a note here, do they have to he's mentioned they have to restart the whole process. And I just want to get an understanding, don't they shortlist 3 or 4 people, and then if the first candidate don't accept, they go to the next or the third candidate, or is it a DPSA requirement that they have to redo the whole process? Because obviously that will affect all positions they advertise. And then, Chairperson, under on page 58, under major planned procurement, and I know that they mentioned the new staff, but what exactly are they going to procure from an IT perspective? We can just get more details on it. And my third question will be to the CFO. In our last POC meeting, and this is related to what the Minister of Finance announced last week, or in the budget a few days ago, sorry. One of the questions I remember asking was about supply development, and she mentioned obviously it falls under Provincial Treasury. And I just wanted to find out, for small suppliers in Provincial Parliament itself, except Treasury, is there anything they do to help and do workshops? Because I see the Department of Public Works and Transport have their own unit that trains small suppliers on how to become compliant. Is there anything Parliament's doing to help or train and develop small suppliers to become compliant so they can do business with Parliament? And then I'll leave that for now, Chair, because others are on the actual programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Mackenzie. And then I also have a question on page 58. Let me just get there quickly. It's on departmental receipts. That stands at 75,000 for the upcoming financial year. I'd just like to understand why there's such a large reduction in the upcoming financial year compared to the previous year. And that then concludes the questions up to page 59. May I hand over to you, Mr. Speaker or Mr. Secretary, please?
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. The question by Honourable Leke, the Director PO will respond to that, Ms. Fouchier. And the question by Honourable Mackenzie and the Mr. Baruti, Mr. Chowdin is going to deal with that. And then the question that you've raised, the CFO and Mr. Chowdin will deal with that. Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you, honourable members. The questions will be responded to as the Speaker had directed. Maybe just a general comment, Honourable Mackenzie. The Western Cape Provincial Parliament is not subjected to the processes as dictated by the Department of Public Service and Administration. We could be guided by those processes, but we are not forced to use those processes. With regards to the vacancies and the example that Mr. Titus had used of the candidate that had indicated that had declined the offer. Yes, between 3, 5, sometimes a bit more candidates are shortlisted for each of the posts. But the results of the interviews is whether the panel found any of those candidates to be suitable for appointment. Now, in some cases, the panel could find more than one person suitable. In other cases, the panel could find only one person suitable. In an example where the panel found more than one candidate suitable, there is obviously the options of a plan B and a plan C, where in a case where a panel had found only one person suitable, when that person declines the offer of appointment, the process is in all likelihood then closed, and the panel then has to decide, do we re-advertise the post? Do we want to go back to see what other applications there were, or what is the process that the institution will be following? I'll now hand over to firstly maybe the CFO, and then Ms. Fushia, and then Mr. Titus for the responses to the follow-up questions. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Secretary. Just in respect of supplier development, no, the Western Cape Provincial Parliament doesn't specifically have a supplier development program. Transport and Public Works would embark on something like that because they're suppliers in terms of construction, and that would have specific needs. Most of our commodities that we buy are generally sort of the generic type of things, and therefore that is covered by the supplier development that Provincial Treasury has, and generally that's in most of the sort of rural areas to try and bring them all on board. We do, however, intend most likely in the financial year coming up, we'll try to maintain an internal supplier database, but specifically with services specific to the WCPP, with sort of interpreters as one of the examples, so that we'd have a base of interpreters from which to work from when we use them throughout the year. So supplier development in terms of our commodities and the supplier database we use does happen on the side of Provincial Treasury, and we don't have our own supplier development program, but we are pursuing specific services in maintaining a database in-house. Thanks. Mr. Jawudeen will just address the other budget question.
Thank you, Chairperson. If I may, just address Chairperson's specific question regarding the reduction in the receipts. The main reason for that, if I may refer the committee to table 6.1, where it gives a summary of receipts. As we can specifically see in the table, our receipts have reduced from the current year, which is of 1.045 million to 75. With regards to receipts, we just budget minimally with regards to what we expect our revenue receipts to be. However, if I can maybe take the committee back to, I think, a good couple of years ago, there was old LSS funding, which LSS at National Parliament, they informed WCPP about 4 years ago that they won't be requesting the remainder of that funds back, and WCPP would be able to use that for specific purposes within the legislature. That was an amount of about 1.9 million, just less than 1.9 million that we had in our bank account. We then asked the Provincial Treasury that we're going to revote that amount over 3 years, and broken down into 3 amounts of 400,000, 750 and 750. That was 3 years ago, and the last 750 of that funds is currently in this financial year, and they are referred to the committee to the table, to the 2021 table, where it's a 750. The committee will then see that there's no 750 in next financial. That is because that funding comes to an end this current financial year, and there's no carry forward for that 750, and that 750 is particularly earmarked for a development of a corporate video within the stakeholder management unit. So that's the main reason for the reduction in the receipts, is because of the fact that we have a 750 of old LSS funding, which we have revoted, which we paid over to Provincial Treasury, or revoted to us over a 3-year period. And then obviously in this current year, under interest and dividends, the 231 is actual interest that we have received during the year, whereas we only make a small provision for it in the outer year. However, once we do have an accurate figure of what the revenue is from interest, we do then obviously retain that interest in our revenue. That's the response with regards to the reduction in receipts, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. In response to the 2 questions on public participation, the first one is, yes, there is a budget cut. We have invested a lot of money this year, both from our budget and from the LSS funding that's available to us, to procure digital tools or applications to assist us to to shift from having physical workshop, or the need to have physical workshop, and that cuts out a lot of expense in terms of accommodation, in terms of transport, in terms of venue hire and catering. There's a lot of things that we do not need to expend on utilizing these tools at our disposal. We are not looking at cutting out person-to-person contact. On the contrary, there's no way that we can do that, and we will see that with our Tetanati project, and those are all budgeted for. So everything that we are planning, we have included in the budget. Like I say, it is a shift that we are making to digital engagement as well. And we have seen, even with the COVID-19 ad hoc committee and the standing committee on education, that people are participating digitally if they're interested in the event. With regards to partnerships, that's another way that we are reducing our cost and leveraging of our partners for them as much as for us. We've already entered into a memorandum of understanding with the Department of Local Government with regards to formalizing and guiding our partnership with the CDWs, the Community Development Workers. They assist us greatly in areas where we can't necessarily be, both in terms of preparation and in terms of facilitating meetings and things like that for us. We are in the process of entering into an agreement with the Commission for Gender Equality, and the Department of Education is also on our list of people. We are already partnering with them. Remember, we had in 2019 the handover of educational materials that we sent to all the schools in the Western Cape, and we had the formal handover at Jakes Gerwel in Bonnievale. That's already a project that we're doing with the Department of Education, but we want to deepen that partnership for the benefit of both the Department of Education and WCPP. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Jawudeen.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to maybe just to add on to what Sunil has mentioned, and to answer Honourable Lekker's concern with regards to the reduction in the budget and public engagement. Just to specifically mention that in real terms or effect, there's not really a reduction in the public engagement budget, but in direct relation to my previous response, in the public engagement budget over the past, particularly in this current financial year, that LSS funds was included, and that's once of expenditure where there's no carry through. So that's why they looks like there is a reduction, but in real terms, there's no real reduction in the public engagement budget. But like Sunil said, all that sort of provision has been made in the budget for them to carry through with their mandated functions. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much for those responses. We'll then move on to any follow-up questions on those responses, and we'll also move on to item number 7 on page 60, 61 and 62. Are there any questions on page 60, 61 or 62, please?
Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Mackenzie.
Can I continue?
Yes, please do.
Thank you. Chairperson, on page 59 at the bottom, I'm just curious, under departmental receipts, commission earned. I'm curious to know what are we earning commission for as a department? And then secondly, on page 60, at the bottom under improvements of condition services, and that is linked to my page 60. Oh, Chairperson, can I just, if you mind, because some of these questions are linked to probably up to the annexes. Can I continue?
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you. Linked to page 66 to the increase of 4.55% under household due to incentive rewards for qualifying staff. I just want to get some detail. Is that just normal salary increases? Because they specifically use the word incentive rewards. Get more details from HR on that. And obviously, who's the qualifying staff and what's the criteria if one can get that? And then on that remuneration question, Chairperson, previously there was a discussion around the overtime policy, and I want to find out if that has changed. And I want to reference again, my committee is going out in 3 weeks' time, and some of the, when we travel from town to town, it will be after 5, and will staff be paid for overtime. So that's linked to that. And then on Mr. Titus's response and on what Mr. Romeo Adams has said, on the shortlisting of these candidates and they only found 1 or 2 people suitable, are we looking at re-looking at our recruitment strategy? I mean, given the high unemployment we have expanded, I think we're 42% unemployment rate at the moment, surely there's more people unemployed at this level that apply for jobs that we should be able to shortlist as suitably candidates, 10, 15 people. I just want to find out if we're going to relook at our recruitment strategy. And on page 69, I made a note, impact of services. If one look at our public engagements decrease, what is the impact? And I think Member Lecker asked a similar question, the impact of our services on the funding. And my last question, Chair, check my notes. On page 64, sorry to go back, under legal services, with the 23% increase, what are we looking at? What's the reason therefore? Similar to under strategy and organizational performance, 33%, and institutional enablement from 26 to 32 million. If we can just get clarity on those questions. And then the last question here on page 70, state contributions to medical aid from continuation members, sorry. I can understand for the existing members, but because they use the word continuation, is there an understanding that we also pay for former members? Or if it's not, I understand that, but just because they use the word continuation, that's why I'm asking. And yeah, that's all my questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Lecker. You're next.
My first question, Chair, is on page 60, table 6.2, on the summary of payments and estimate of receipts. Now, if you're looking at governance and leadership administration, one would note that while Program 1 has received the largest chunk of the budget, it seems that the gap between it and other programs is just growing and growing. It cannot be that a third of the budget, nearly 34%, goes into one of 4 programs, and even worse, it is the program of the administration. For instance, the Speaker and the Secretary's offices, among others, whilst other programs which are core business of this Parliament is suffering. But also, Chair, if you're looking at this, it has probably to do with staffing. That if you're looking at Program 1, they have the most staff members, but even this must then be addressed, because as to whether shouldn't the other programs also be given more staff members. For an example, if Program 1 has 64 staff members, whilst Program 4 members support only has 2 staff members, like if you go back now to page 73, shouldn't this be addressed? And also, again, in table 8.1 under legal services, the legal services has an estimate increase of something like 23%. Why is this so? Are these legal services available to members in respect of other work that they carry out? Or what exactly is happening? This is in reference to page 76 once again. And maybe just once, can I go to page 73, Chair? Chair?
Sorry,
Are you still there?
Yes, sorry, just give me a moment. I needed to unmute.
Okay.
Are you referring to the annexures?
Yes, Chair, but just
Okay.
on details of the transfers and subsidies.
Yes, you can reference it if it's related to your current question.
Yes, so I just want to check, Chair, as exactly how does this happen within the programs, the staffing of Program 1, whilst other programs do not have the same capacity in terms of staff members. Thank you.
Honourable Tseho, I recognise you next.
Thanks. Mine is on page 59 at the bottom there, under the departmental receipts. I note there that there is what is referred to as interest of debt. So what I wanted to understand that what debt is that the legislature is referring to here, if we can be able to elaborate more. And then also on page 61, table 7.1, the estimated expenditure on public engagement programs, that has decreased. What I now want to understand is that what impact would it have now going forward in terms of public participation, and noting that public participation is one of the integral parts of Parliament to do a proper outreach to the communities. Thanks very much, Chairperson.
Thank you. And then I have two questions, if I may. They're all on page 60, table 6.2. If I could just ask the direct charge on the Provincial Revenue Fund, what is funded by this direct charge? And then my second question is on members' remuneration. I see that has a decrease. I mean, what are we expecting here? I know we have a fixed number of members and positions. Is this, if we look at the main appropriation from the previous financial year, it's not so different. I'd just like to understand then the difference between the revised estimate and then the budget set aside for the coming financial year. Is that as a result of gratuities of retiring members? Just an explanation on that, please. That then concludes this round of questions up to and including page 62. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. Mr. Secretary, will you please take charge?
Thank you, Speaker. Chairperson, there's questions related to finance and the numbers that Mr. Jawuddin and the CFO will respond to. There's also then, I think there was a follow-up question from Ms. Fouchier regarding public participation, and then with regards to the remuneration increases and the rewards, Mr. Titus will respond to, and also the overtime policy. Thank you, Chair, and also the shortlisting processes. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Mr. Jawuddin, over to you.
Thank you, Chairperson. If I can touch on the questions relating to the variances and the decrease and increases on the particular tables. I think the first question I'd like to answer is Member Mackenzie's question on the commission earned. What that specifically is we do receive a very small fund with regards to the paying over of or basically garnishings, like for example SARS when we get a garnishing order. So there is a small fee that we do receive for the garnishing orders. So that's basically what that commission earned is. With regards to just see the incentive rewards with regards to qualifying staff members. What that is that each manager within WCPP has a budget for an incentive reward for particularly if any of his staff member does something that's over and above his normal work. If it's an isolated incident, the manager can, there's an incentive reward policy that allows for the manager to provide that particular staff member with a 500 Rand voucher or a 500 Rand gift card specifically, or as a recognition of a isolated incident where staff has performed over and above what it's supposed to do. That's separate to the performance management process. With regards to, Chair, if I may go through if you're okay with the Chair, if you don't mind, I'm going to go through the explanation of the variances page by page, because I think there were a couple of questions that jumped across the pages. So Chair, if you're okay with it, I'll start on page 60. I think the one particular question, and it came from Honourable Lecker, was regarding the big chunk of the budget and the increase in Program 1. I think I must alert or refer the committee specifically to the comment made by the Speaker as well as myself previously, that during the adjustments estimate process, the biggest chunk of the budget or the saving that was paid over to Provincial Treasury was from Program 1, and therefore I actually refer the committee to what the regional budget was 71 million. That was reduced to 64 million. So even though it looks like a big increase, we specifically cut that budget in the adjustments estimate and just basically brought the budget back to what it should be. But honourable member is correct that this program, it does have more staff. So the increase it does take into account vacant posts within the sub program, or in this program, sorry, that provision has been made for filling of that post. And that's the main reason for the increase in that particular program is the fact that budget was cut previously and we made provision for what the budget would have been, as well as filling of vacant posts. Then on that same page, Chair, if I may answer your question regarding members' remuneration. Member is Honourable Chairperson, you are correct with regards to the increase. If I may refer specifically to, the first part of the question was what particularly is this for? So members' remuneration is purely member salaries. So that specifically does come from the Provincial Revenue Fund, and that's not part of WCPP's equitable share, but is separate from the budget, and that's member salaries purely with regards to that. Like mentioned earlier, this is also, even though it shows a decrease, not a decrease in the true sense of the word, in the sense that in this current financial year, in April 2020, the members' gratuities were paid, and Provincial Treasury made, or the Provincial Revenue Fund did give us the funds for that gratuities. So the Chair, if the committee will, if I can letter or refer the committee to the difference between the main appropriation and adjusted appropriation. So the main appropriation was 4.45 million, but there was a 6 point something million added to that budget to make provision for the once-off gratuities that were paid to the exiting members, and that was with a unique circumstance within this financial year. But as the committee can see, that there is an increase from what the main appropriation was to next year. So there is an increase provided for members' salaries. The decrease, like I said, is mainly due, Chairperson is correct, is due to the gratuities that were paid out in 2021. On page 61, there was a question regarding the decrease again with public engagement, whether public outreach can still be done. I'll ask Nell if she can refer to that particular thing, but just to mention with regards to the decrease, that is again in direct relation to what I mentioned earlier. Even though we're showing a decrease, but in the current financial year, there were once-off expenditure, particularly in 750,000 in stakeholder management, as well as another 750 and 400 in public engagement for once-off LSS project. It was in this current financial year that ends now in this current financial year, and there's no carry-through effect of that. So even though we are showing a 10% decrease, if the real effect with regards to that is actually not a decrease, because the once-off expenditure was for the LS, which is basically the LSS funding over the past 3 years, comes to an end this year. So the carry-through of that makes it look like a decrease, but not really a decrease, particularly in that program. Whether the public education programs can still continue, I'll ask Sunil for me if she can maybe just touch on that. That's with regard to page 61. I think there was a question on page 64 and 65 as well. The increase with regards to legal services, that increase is purely due to the planned filling of a vacant post that was vacant in this current financial year. There again, the committee will see that the original budget was 3.3 million. Because the post wasn't filled, we reduced that as part of the cut and the funds paid over to Treasury. We have now made provision for the filling of that vacant post within legal services. So the main reason for that big increase is the fact that the original budget was reduced, and because the vacancy wasn't filled, that saving on the vacancy was paid back to PT. However, we have now made provision for that vacant post in the outer year, which now looks like it's a big increase, but it's actually a inflationary increase specifically, or a normal increase from the previous year to this year. Then with regards to strategy and organizational performance, there as well, same reason exactly. We had a regional budget of 1.7. There was vacant posts which we didn't fill. So we actually specifically made provision for that. So the committee will see that the original budget was 1.782 million, but in this year's 1.786, which is a very small, only a 4,000 rand increase, which is in real effect not a 33.28% increase, but that's increase. The reason for that big increase is due to the fact that there was vacant post in that sub-program that wasn't filled, and that savings on that vacant post was paid back to the Provincial Treasury during the adjustments estimate process. With regards to institutional enablement, there's also an increase there. That there as well, there were vacant posts specifically with regards to that. There will, I would like to refer to the reduction of the regional budget from 30.5 million to 26 million. That saving was in program 1, and like I mentioned earlier, that was part of the 12% budget cuts that we paid over to Provincial Treasury. If you look at the real effect, there's only really a less than 2 million increase in that sub-program, which is much less than what the 19% is. But there specifically provision is made for the vacant posts, as well as once-off projects such as the ERP additions and the business intelligence implementation, we also made provision for in the 21-22 financial year. Chairperson, I think I covered all the variances questions. I think the other question from Member Klego was regarding the interest of debt, what that particularly is. The interest of debt is basically, we have various forms of interest and various forms of debt, and certain debts attract interest. For example, if there's a salary overpayment of a particular staff member, then if that's the salary, that's the generate interest, and if there's an overpayment to a particular supplier, or then until that debt is paid back, where that is interest is charged on that based on the government gazette's agreed upon interest rate. Let's see, have I covered everything? I think I covered everything for regards to the finance and budget, Chairperson. I think I'll hand over to Sunil with regards to PO and the rest of the questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Boucher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Dawood, essentially, Mr. Jawuddin, sorry, has essentially answered the question. What seems like a deduction or a reduction, sorry, in the budget of PEO or public engagement is not really. It is just that we are reverting to our normal budget as opposed to the LSS funding. It will have no impact on the carrying out of our duties and our plans as per the annual performance plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further inputs, questions that remain unanswered? Mr. Titus?
Yes, ma'am. Could I just respond to some of the questions from the Honourable Mackenzie? I'll start with the incentive reward. I think Mr. Jawuddin had partially or mostly covered that. It is the 500 rand spot rewards that we provide to staff as an incentive. We also have long service awards that we honor individual people who have been with the institution for a protracted period. Just for noting for the POC chair is that we have had extensive discussions about consolidating our incentive and reward policy, and we want to go the direction where we're saying we're not only linking this to funds, we also want to link this to the values of the WCPP. So we've had our internal conversations, and that is a policy that is in an advanced state of approval at this stage. Let me also speak then, Chair, about the question that the Honourable Mackenzie asked around the overtime policy. That policy is still under discussion. We've not concluded on the overtime policy yet. Within the context of the working from home, we know that we're not ticking the hours as we would normally do. And so within the working from home policy, we have indicated in that policy that overtime is not permissible at this stage. We understand that we cannot have a one-size-fits-all, and that is why we are still in discussion around the overtime policy. It's at policy task team level, which is an integrated team with members of organized labor, NAHAU, as part of that conversation. There was a further comment by Honourable Mackenzie to say that, look, we do have a lot of unemployment within the country, and to what extent is our strategy addressing that, and are we going to be re-looking at the strategy? The recruitment policy is one of those that we have identified, the HR manager and I, for rework and relook in the new financial year. I also want to say to you, Chair, that it's unfortunately not a one-size-fits-all. Certain positions within the organization lend itself to a better or a wider group of people applying. If I can use the example of the director PSS, we know how we've struggled with that particular process because it was very specific kind of skill sets that were required for that particular position. And I think, and for the Director PSS, the issue was about the particular skill sets and an understanding of the context in which that position must function. If I can just use IT as an example, we've got a very, very small IT team, but we don't have developer skill sets built within that team. Developer skill sets, analyst skill sets, it's very, very expensive. I know that with our counterparts within the Western Cape government can pay up to 140, 150,000 per month per individual for those specialist skills. So in certain instances, we cannot compete even with what the industry is providing out there. And in other instances, it's very specific skill sets that we require. So it is a little bit of a balancing act, but we are going to be looking at that even within the context of policy and how that can assist our processes going forward. I think I've covered all the areas on my list. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, maybe just to respond, I think Honourable Lekker, in asking a question, had indicated that the majority of, well, the majority of the increases is in Programme 1, and also that the majority of staff is in Programme 1. So, Chairperson, in response to the comment of Honourable Lekker, the following. The Western Cape Provincial Parliament, we are currently still busy in the process of that. The vacancies that we are filling are vacancies that were identified through the functional enhancement process. In some of the areas in Programme 1 that deals with governance and governance matters and compliance, there is the issue of the separation of functions that needs to happen, meaning one person can't do the capturing and the checking function. Maybe just to add and to conclude on that, also what we have been doing, we've not just willy-nilly taken the functional enhancement that has identified posts and say we will now fill all of those posts. Like Mr. Titus has said, we've also been going through a refinement process, and in Programme 1, for example, there's a post that we had indicated that we don't see the need for that post being filled now at this stage. There's another post where we had indicated, no, we think that that unit is sufficiently resourced because the work is being done. Maybe we could look somewhere else in the organization in utilizing the funding for that specific post. And that is the process we are going through to make sure that the institution is adequately and correctly resourced in terms of its human resources, so that we deal with the issue of compliance, of governance, but also programmatic work that needs to happen during the rollout of our programs. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. Members, can I then move on? We'll have a round of follow-up questions on those responses. And we will also look at item number 8 on pages 62 to 64. So follow-ups plus pages 62 to 64. I'll start with you, Honourable Lekker.
Thank you, Chairperson. Just one follow-up on the input that has just been made by Mr. Adams. Exactly when do we envisage that we would be getting maybe a kind of a report on the separation of functions and maybe the filling of those vacancies that may arise as a result of that process? Then, Chair, no, I don't have a question on this other round, just one follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Mackenzie.
Thank you, Chairperson. Just on the vacancies, one can understand, and thank you, Mr. Titus, on the specialist position, like the developer. I mean, they are very expensive. But out of the 14 vacancies, what percentage of those are specialists and what percentage is not? And if the majority of them is not specialist positions, I think that's to my question. I'm going to relook at your recruitment strategy to say, how do we fill positions that is not specialist position that can easily be filled, given we're on 42% unemployment, and expand the definition. And when we look at the overtime policy, by when can we have, will you give this committee feedback on when is it finalized? Because my concern is, Chair, in 3 weeks' time, the standing committee, I think this morning social development is also joining us, is going to go on oversight versus, and that issue is going to become a topical issue about when can official leaves, when do they need to come back. when do we as a standing committee need to conclude our meetings during the course of the day to enable officials to get whether to their hotel or come back to Cape Town, so that they are not prejudiced unfairly by not getting overtime. And then on that question, third question on that, Chair, when we talk about enable technology, because for example, we are going to travel with the bus between towns, and part of the problem in the past has been that because if you use normal phone data, which I know we can claim from Parliament, it becomes quite expensive. Whether if you have a bus enabled with a Wi-Fi, for example, it's much, much cheaper. For example, you can get on a taxi in some areas, you can get free Wi-Fi. So when we do procure those services, are we looking at these things, and how can we enable, as you say in your vision, enable those access to technologies? When the members go on oversight, they travel on a bus, they can get Wi-Fi, for example. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Mackenzie. I had a follow-up. Sorry, it's a question I forgot to ask. It's on page 61. I'm going to pose it as a follow-up. Under households, non-profit institutions in table 7.2, there's a 2.66% increase. Can I just confirm if that is the funding to political parties, and whether this amount includes the commemorative and disaster support funding that parties receive? And then further on page 63, if we could just understand the salary adjustments, what is the extent of salary adjustments for staff under the expenditure trends analysis on the bottom of page 63? Let me just check. Yeah, those are my questions. The others have been covered. Thank you very much. I'll hand over to the administration.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Chairperson. I think there's one or two questions again for Mr. Jawuddin, and then the one for Mr. Titus, the follow-ups from Honourable Mackenzie. Thank you, Chairperson.
Mr. Jawuddin, please proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to, I think, answer your question for the Chairperson, with regards to the 2.6% increase for non-profit institutions, yes, Chairperson, you are correct that that is for the political parties, basically the secretarial and constituency allowance line item. However, the reason for the less than what the actual increase there is again because in this current financial year, the pandemic allowance was a once-off expenditure. So that once-off expenditure of a provision was made for in this current financial year, and there's no currently in the budget there's no carry through for that particular expenditure. So the real actual increase was about 4.8%, but because in this current financial year there was a once-off expenditure for the pandemic allowance, which reduces the actual expenditure going forward. And then to answer the other question regarding the salary increase, so a provision has been made for salary increases for the next financial year on a sliding scale, even though that is that decrease is less than what would normally have been, and that's in direct relation to meetings and discussion with Provincial Treasury, looking at the province and the minimized salary increases specifically. So WCPP has made a smaller than normal provision for salary increases, but not in line with inflation, because of the fact that there is talk with regards to the reducing of salary increase until the country's fiscal constraints do improve. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is Mr. Titus next?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Chair, just with regard to the question from Honourable Mackenzie on the progress on overtime, we have discussions scheduled for the next week and the week thereafter. So we will have some feedback within the next 3 weeks with regard to overtime progress and that policy and the policy position there. With the issues of technology, we are constantly looking at best ways of how to do this. Also within the confines of the fiscal confines, we are looking at what other options there are to provide the best possible support that we can that we can bring. The question about how many of the posts are actually specialist positions. We've got about 70 to almost 80% of the positions of the 14 posts being really specialized positions. Amongst this, We've got the Director Parliamentary Support Services, which I've mentioned a little earlier, that has been filled, that is going to be filled now. There's the Director Strategy and Institutional Oversight. And here the skill set is not only about, the skill set is also about the individual, that is the incumbent, being able to be quite adept at impact analysis, quite adept at developing indicators, etc., etc. So it is quite a specialized. It's quite a specialized area. There's a legal advisor, for instance, which is a specific position that is a specialist one as well. We've just had interviews for the Senior Members Affairs Officer. That is not somebody outside of the legislature that is necessarily going to be able to understand all of the rules and all of the context for a Senior Members Affairs Officer. We do have positions in IT, ICT officer. We know that the manager plenary support, which, as Member Lekker had indicated earlier on, is also part of our core business. That is also a specialist position. So about 70 to 80% of our current advertised, the 14 posts, are posts that are really within niche. There are other posts in between as well, like a receptionist, or the office administrator, which is similar to a PA position, which one can say are positions that where we have readily skills available in those areas. The rest is very bespoke, and that, I think, is part of the reason why it becomes very difficult to attract in that particular area people who are going to be full-rounded individuals. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Chairperson. Maybe just to round up this round of responses, if I can start with the salary adjustments. Chairperson, we've budgeted for salary adjustments like Mr. Jabudeen had indicated, but maybe just as to give context. Over the past few years, salary adjustments within the sector, being National Parliament and other provincial legislatures, their percentages have all been higher than what the Western Cape Provincial Parliament had agreed to with the union in terms of those increases. For example, in the previous round of negotiations, colleagues in the legislatures had received a 6.5% increase, where our percentage was on a sliding scale, and the highest percentage wasn't even 6% that was agreed to with the unions. So we just don't want to become too out of kilter with the salaries within the sector. Otherwise, there is the possibility of us losing staff members because the attraction on the other side is greater in terms of the salaries. But we've always been stuck to what has been budgeted for over the past few years and not exceeded that in terms of the envelope. If we talk about overtime and Honourable Mackenzie, when the lockdown was implemented, we had moved from a time in attendance scenario to an output scenario, which means that we can't really manage every single minute of every single hour while staff are working from home and or being in the office, because when a staff member leaves the office, the expectation is still that he or she will be available until a certain time for those services. But because we have moved to output, there are some concessions that the employer has put in place. And overtime, generally, when average speaks of the amount of hours per month that you're supposed to work and that you exceed per month, which means that any hours over than 168 on average hours a month could be considered for overtime. When we look at it at a week, any amount over on average 40 hours per week could be considered for overtime. But if a staff member, because of the nature of the work and because we are working from home, on one day works a few minutes or a few hours less, on the other day has to be expected to work a few more hours, when you average it out, surely it is reasonable to assume that over the week that you were supposed to work, over the month that you were supposed to work, your 168 hours, if we calculate all of that, you would not have worked more than 168 hours, number one, because of our working from home thinking. or number two, you would not have worked more than the 40 hours. So there may be days where a staff member is expected to work a few minutes or an hour or so longer, but there would also be other days where the staff member might work a few minutes or a few hours less. But over average, over time, it should then work out. And I think that is the type of thinking. When we talk of overtime in a lockdown period where we don't have 100% of staff for every single day, 8 hours of the day, for 40 hours in the week, for 168 hours in the month, physically in attendance at work, but we rather manage the output, whether the overtime policy as we know it traditionally and the thinking of overtime as we know it traditionally, whether that still applies in the new environment, the new normal where working from home could become a standard practice and those type of things. Chairperson, that was that one. The second one, Chairperson, or the next one speaks to the position of specialist. When we advertise a post, well, before we get to advertise a post, when we start identifying what is the post that's needed in an organization, there's an exercise that's called an organizational development exercise that understands the need for the post, what the job needs to do, and what is the remuneration level attached to that post. So you could, for example, find a position where they say we need this qualification with that number of years of experience. Even if the staff member meets the qualification requirement, if the applicant does not meet the experience requirement and there are other candidates who meet the experience requirement, then we're going to find it very difficult to entertain that application over and above the other applications. Yes, I understand, and I'm sure we all acknowledge the high unemployment rate within the country, but there's probably only certain positions, and I think that is where your question had gone to. Certain positions where we could see isn't there a better process of addressing the issue of unemployment in the province itself than just doing the normal traditional ways of recruiting. Chairperson, my last comment, and I wasn't quite clear from Honourable Lekker's input. There was a question on when can we expect a report re the separation of functions. I don't know if that was a request for a report specifically, and if the question could maybe just be framed more clearer so that from the administration side we understand and we provide the information that is being sought. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I'll now open for a round of and move on to program 2, found 7. Could I see a show of hands if there are any questions on page 67 based on the responses received? If there are none, I have one question on page 66 under expenditure trends analysis. The increase of 4.55% under households. I'd just like to understand if that then means bonuses, if that amount provisioned is for bonuses. I don't have any further questions. Honourable Mackenzie does. I'll see you, Honourable Mackenzie.
Thank you, Chairperson. And thank you for that explanation, Mr. Adams. I do understand it much better. Chairperson, on page 67, understanding committees. If you look at there was a percentage increase of 24.44%. If one can just get an understanding, what's the reason for that, please? And that's the only question I have there. Thank you. And sorry, Chair, I didn't get a clear explanation with regards to the medical aid question I asked earlier on. And the reason that I asked the question is previously when the medical aid person came to do a presentation to the committee, I think it was the sworn in of the second term of they indicated that there's a percentage that members pay less, I think for third or second term, that you do pay less, I think 70% or 60%. I'm not sure about the third or fourth term. If anyone here is an expert on it, that they're welcome to share. Otherwise, I'll just sort of write to the medical aid and get an understanding of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I hand over to the administration then? Honourable Mackenzie, your camera is still on.
Chairperson, I think your question related to page 66. So Mr. Jawadin would respond to that question. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Chair, if I may.
Yes, please.
Okay. Chair, 4.55% increase for household due to provision for incentive rewards. I want to confirm, is that the question Chairperson asking about the 4.55% increase, eh?
Yeah.
Okay. If I may
that
ask,
is correct.
If I may refer the committee just to the next page on page 67, on the table 8.2.1 under household, that's where the increase specifically is a 4.55, and Chair, that's in direct relation to what we discussed earlier. That's for incentive rewards at 500 Rand vouchers that myself and Mr. Titus spoke about. The previous or the original budget was 23,000, but due to the fact that we reduced that budget by 1,000 in this past financial year due to vacant posts, that was reduced to 22. But in the next financial year, we fully funded that to 23,000 again to fund it for the full staffing complement. So in effect, there's no real increase, but because in the current financial year we reduced it by 1,000, the provision for the incentive reward stays at 23,000 for the full staff complement because the policy makes provision for that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Understood. Are there any responses to Honourable Mackenzie's questions?
Chairperson, I don't know if Mr. Titus or the CFO would want to respond to the question on the medical aid payments.
Thank you. If they are familiar with that and are able to respond, I'll give an opportunity now. Mr. Titus,
Chair,
thank you.
Chair, I think Mr. Jawuddin is going to respond to that one.
Thank you, Chair. Just with regards to the members, the medical aid, yes, with regards to the continuation and members, we do pay to PARMED, and that's basically for members as well as members post I think 1994 something. So we do still pay for continuation members as well, based on, and we get a invoice from PARMED every month that we do pay for specifically based on a list of names that we receive. So once a member passes away, obviously, then the name will change, but we do pay specifically based on an invoice we receive from PARMED with a list of members' names on there. I think that answers the question. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. They will then move on to any follow-up questions, if there are any, based on those responses, and then we move on to Programme 3, which is page 68 to page 70. Page 68 to 70, and any follow-ups on the previous input. Honourable Mackenzie, I see you.
Yes, Chairperson, just on the standing committees on page 67, the 24% decrease, and then on the medical aid question, perhaps I rephrase it properly. What I'm trying to understand, if anybody here knows, it'll be helpful, but if they don't, I can find out from the medical aid. At one of the medical briefings, I think Mrs. Fouché was still around, they indicated members that have served X amount of terms that wants to continue with the medical aid pays a lesser amount. I think after 2 or 3 terms or after 4 terms, 67% of the medical aid, if I can remember correctly. I think when I first came a member 2014, Mrs. Fouché brought them in at the time. Is that still applicable, or was there new policy? I'm just trying to understand that part. Either no one here knows, and I can write to the medical aid and get a proper explanation. Thank you.
Do you have any questions on page 68 to 70, Honourable Mackenzie?
Nothing, Chairperson, sorry.
Okay, I don't have any questions either. All right, then, okay, so if we've got those 2 questions, I'm going to open up as well for Programme 4, which is page 70 to 73. If there are any questions there. None. All right, then I'm just going to hand over to the administration for those 2 questions from Honourable Mackenzie. If the answer is available. Thank you, Mr. Jawuddin.
Thank you, Chief. If I may just get clarity from Honourable Mackenzie. Honourable Mackenzie spoke to a variance of 24%. Can I maybe just confirm which page that is on? I think I just missed that.
Thank you. That is on page, sorry, Mr. Chair, if I may, on page 67 on the standing committees from the revised estimate to the 2021-22. So that's from the 1.5 million. The main appropriation was 2.7 million. And I can imagine why it was lower, because obviously the standing committee didn't meet physically. But then the revised was 1.5, but then we're now at 1.1.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, that member, Honourable Chair and Honourable Mackenzie. Yes, that's in direct relation to the Standing Committee's budget, and that is the unfortunate. Like I did mention previously that we won't be transferring any more of our rollover funds, particularly in the third adjustments estimate, was because of the fact that our budget for the MTIF has been reduced, and this budget for the next year has been based on the reduction in travel in committees based on the results and COVID relief, the results of COVID. So the budget for transport within standing committees has been reduced, but we have flagged that particularly with regards to an area where we might need to look at funding, particularly in the outer years, once we have a clearer picture on our rollovers. But that is a reduction, particularly because of the fact of the reduction in travel costs in the current financial year for that particular line item. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Jawadin. I think Honourable Mackenzie, you'll have to pose those questions specifically on the pay scales of PARMED directly to the medical aid. It doesn't appear that that information is readily available here. Let's then move on to the final part of the budget. I'm going to now table page 74, as well as the annexures, which can be found on page 75 to 82. So we're tabling page 74 and then the annexures page 75 to 82. Are there any questions on these pages? I will start with you, Honourable Allen.
Thank you, Chairperson. I have one on 74, and I'm delighted that bursaries are again being offered to staff. Are we able to get a breakdown of those bursaries across which programs within the administration? That will be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Honourable Mackenzie.
Thank you, Chairperson. I want to get to our good friend Public Works. And I've been looking to the item, it's not, but it's my last question on this book, but I know that I've missed it personally. On our building that we're in and on the rats that's now visiting, seeing that they were also seemingly not in lockdown while all of us was, where are we with the latest on Public Works in taking care as being our landlord? Thank you.
Thank you. Then I also have a question on page 180 in the book. I see the budgets for S&T and advertising have returned to the previous financial year's level. So I'd just like to understand, are we expecting a return to our normal operations in this respect, and we're not anticipating further lockdowns that would potentially affect these budgets? Okay. Are there any other final questions on the annexures on page 74? If none, I'll then hand over to the administration. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Mr. Jawadin would answer the question on the S&T and the advertising. Ms. Fushia, the Public Works question. Thank you, Chairperson.
Chairperson, if I may just confirm which pages Chairperson referring to specifically regarding the advertising and the variances. If I may just get...
It's on page 80.
Okay, so, okay, with regards to the S&T, Chair, yes, we have made provision for S&T specifically with what we had in the previous year, and we're looking at that is one of the items specifically we're looking at during the financial year as to how we can supplement that based on the pandemic. So the provision has been made as to what we currently are showing, but that is one of the items we will more than likely be monitoring in the early part of the next financial year, particularly with regards to that. But we have made provision for it based on the current trends and the COVID savings that we have made. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And then was it Ms. Fisher next?
Sorry, thank you, Chair. This unmuting business, at least I didn't leave the meeting unwittingly instead of me unmuting myself. It has happened. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Mackenzie, for your question. It's the same old story with the fire rationale and the booms and the rats and all the problems that we are having. We have weekly meetings with DTPW, and we try to raise our concerns as much as possible during those meetings. We have also revised our service delivery agreement, or our service level agreement, with DTPW, and we've sent it to them. They are currently perusing it. They're taking their time, but hopefully we'll have it finalized before the end of the financial year. We're following up regularly. And in terms of that new document, we have built in a lot more escalation clauses, where it's one thing that we meet with the officials of DTPW every week and nothing happens. So we have built in escalation clauses so that it can go then from officer to officer to director to secretary, and then if we do not find any assistance with our issues, eventually to speaker to minister. So that is in the pipeline, and we hope to have it done by the end of the financial year, and we hope that that will significantly improve the turnaround time that we are getting from DTPW on matters such as you had raised. So.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Are there any further inputs? I think that covers it all. All right, I'm then going to open for final round of questions from any of the members on the budget.
Nothing from my side, Chairperson. I'm covered completely.
Chairperson.
Honourable Doug Moore, welcome to the meeting. I believe you're standing in for Honourable Lacker.
Yes, thank you very much. Chair, I think one of the questions, and I'm not sure exactly where in the budget this falls and whether there has been a specific allocation, but the Speaker and I think the Deputy Speaker, as well as a number of the staff, are aware of the fact that some of us as members have raised a frustration that up until now, as we speak, we still cannot access at one particular place on the web the questions and answers to members' questions for written and oral reply. And in fact, also in regard to Hansard at the moment is available in books in the library, and obviously different Hansards get emailed, but it's not as though if you're looking for a speech that was made in 2018 by the Honourable Mackenzie, you're not able to go to one place, search for that particular speech and try and look very hard for a pearl of wisdom that Member Mackenzie may have spoken on that particular day. That is just a joke, actually. But what I'm trying to say, what I'm trying to say, Chair, is, you know, we've been told that there is a process underway to be able to access all of these questions, answers to those questions, and then also the Hansard. I would just like to ask whether any funds have been committed in this budget to make sure, and what in the annual performance plan are the timeframes involved so that members will actually be able to access such a service. I can't imagine it would be too difficult. It's a question of putting the content together and developing a search engine and so on. So that is one concern that I do have as a member in regard to this particular vote. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Adams.
Chairperson, thank you very much, Chairperson. Chairperson, what we've done over the 2019, 2020 and 2020-21 financial years, the reporting periods, is that our IT colleagues have developed let's call it a portal where instead of members getting the normal presentations on quarterly performance of the institution, where that would now be available through that portal to the members. As part of the portal, we also have an area referred to as strategic documents, and we'll also want to take some of the policies out there and specifically deal with institutional policies. The files currently in the strategic documents link to the portal as institutional records such as research reports, house papers, and all of those other matters. I know our plenary support colleagues who deals with the questions were busy formatting the questions of previous terms and previous years and the responses, and that would then also be uploaded into that portal specifically, Chairperson. So the portal would then not just cover previous questions and responses, but other institutional documents, like I said, like house papers and other documents. Thank you, Chairperson. I trust that would respond to Honourable Dugmore's question. It is the intention that the portal, certain parts of the portal, would then also be made available to members and members of the POC, so that they can track the performance of the WCPP in terms of the APP, outside of us just providing them with the hard copy documents and the presentations at POC meetings. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. We will now then move on to the public hearing of this meeting. Before we do, could I just ask the procedural officer, Mr. Davis, just to give a brief explanation of the advertisement of the public hearing, please?
Chairperson, thank you for that. Chair, the adverts were placed in the various media sources, Chairperson. We usually place the adverts in an Afrikaans newspaper, which is the Burger. Then we place it in the Argus as well for the English readers, and we place it in the Vukani for the Xhosa readers, Chairperson, which makes us compliant to placing adverts in the three required languages of the Western Cape. Chairperson, our meetings are open to the public, Chair. Yeah, it is only under extraordinary circumstances that we close meetings, but in this case, all of our meetings are open to the public as a standing committee, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Davids. Yes, our meeting has been open, and now we open for the public hearing portion of this meeting. And now that we understand the meeting has been widely advertised, I'd like to understand if any members of the public that are joining us today would like to pose any questions. Members of the public are then invited to either raise their hand using the raise hand function or by using the chat function. Just going to give it a minute just to make sure that there are no questions or comments coming from members of the public. Okay, if there are no questions from members of the public on this meeting, then I would then like to thank the Speaker, the Deputy Speaker, the Secretary, the senior management and WCPP officials for joining us today, for presenting the budget and answering all our questions. I'd also like to thank members of the public and media for joining us today. I would like to ask members to stay behind on the virtual platform so that we can draft resolutions emanating from this discussion, as well as other committee administration that needs to be taken care of. On that note, I don't know if the Speaker or Deputy Speaker would like to make some brief concluding remarks.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chairperson, Honourable members. I would like to thank you, Chair, and the members of the committee for your constant reminders of why we are here. You know, very intricate and very, you know, indulging questions so that we're able to respond to the budget that we put before you. So we appreciate that. And I want to thank you, Mr. Secretary, the SMT, and the rest of the staff personnel of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament for your support in ensuring that we're able to table this budget here today. Thank you very much, Honourable Chairperson, and to the people of the Western Cape. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and to the team at the WCPP. You may leave the meeting if you so wish, and if the members would stay behind. I'm going to just have a quick break for members to have a leg stretch. If we could please recommence the meeting at 4:05 for our committee work. So if I could please just ask for a quick 2 or 3 minute break, and we'll see you back on the line then. Thank you very much.
Yes, well, yeah, Chair.
Yes, Chairperson.
Wonderful, thank you. Are there any resolutions or requests for information emanating out of today's meeting? If there are none, can we then proceed?
Did they say they were going to send us the overtime policy when they're done? Because I know they said there's a team looking at it.
I believe that they did, but we can make that one of the requests for information as well as part of today's meeting. I do believe we've asked for that in a few meetings ago as well, but I don't think there's any harm in just reiterating that request. Okay, so I'll ask Mr. Davis just to note that. If there's nothing further, then is the committee ready to consider the committee report on vote to Western Cape Provincial Parliament? Could I understand whether the committee would like to express support for the vote or to reject the vote? I see you, Honourable Allen.
That we support the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable
Chairperson.
Allen. I see, one moment. I see Honourable Mackenzie next.
Chairperson, I concur with Member Allen.
Thank you. Honourable Dugmore.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, we would like the minority view of the ANC to be recorded. We are particularly concerned that even though there has been an increase in the provincial equitable share, and given the pressures on the 42 members of this House, there have not been notable increases to this budget. And we believe that this severely impacts on the ability of the legislature and its members to serve the community of the Western Cape. And for those reasons, we would like our minority view against this particular vote recorded. Thank you.
Thank you. We will record the minority view. Honourable Trejo.
Thanks, Chair. The EFF also does not support the vote. Thanks.
All right, with that being so, then can I read the draft committee report? Let me just find it here. And all right, the draft report of the Parliamentary Oversight Committee on Vote 2, Western Cape Provincial Parliament, in the schedule to the Western Cape Appropriation Bill of 2021, B4 2021, dated 17th of March 2021. The Parliamentary Oversight Committee reports that it has concluded its deliberations on Vote 2, Western Cape Provincial Parliament, in the schedule to the West. Let me confirm there are no objections to the draft committee report as beamed up on the screen. No objections. All right, the draft committee report is then duly adopted for the appropriation bill. Thank you very much. Can we then proceed to adopt minutes? I'm going to ask Mr. Davids if he has a moment, if he could beam up the minutes of our last meeting, please.
No problem, Chairperson. I'm just doing that quickly.
Thank you kindly. If you could make it slightly bigger for us. That is then all the items for our agenda. I'd like to thank the members for their proactive attendance in this meeting and for all the questions asked. I wish you a good afternoon further. The meeting is adjourned.